Welcome to Inside the Philippines. I'm your host, and today's story is one that's going to stick with you. This is Trevor. He's 57 years old, from New Zealand, spent his entire adult life running commercial kitchens across Auckland and Wellington. When we spoke with him, he was packing up his apartment in Dumaguete, preparing to move to Cebu and start over. Again. Trevor came to the Philippines in early 2023 looking for what a lot of guys his age are looking for: a fresh start, maybe some companionship, a place where his savings could stretch further than they would back home. He met someone. She seemed different from the stories he'd heard. Smart, hard-working, had her own career. They built something together, or at least he thought they did. What Trevor discovered changed everything he believed about that relationship, about himself, and about how things really work here. This one's going to make you think twice about a lot of assumptions you might be carrying around. Here's his story, in his own words. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I had some tragic backstory that drove me to the Philippines. Wasn't fleeing demons or running from the law or any of that dramatic nonsense. I was just tired, yeah? Tired, in a way that sleep doesn't fix. 35 years I spent in commercial kitchens across New Zealand. Started as a commis chef in Auckland when I was 22, worked my way up through hotel restaurants, wedding venues, high-volume operations where you're doing 300 covers on a Saturday night. The kind of work where you live on your feet 12 hours a day, where the heat from the ovens and the pressure from the dining room become your normal. Where Friday and Saturday nights aren't for relaxing, they're the busiest shifts of the week. Where Christmas Day means you're prepping turkey for 400 people while everyone else is opening presents with their families. My marriage didn't survive it. Can't really blame my ex-wife, Sandra. How many school plays did I miss? How many anniversaries did I work through? How many family dinners happened without me, because I was at the restaurant making sure other families had their special occasions? It wasn't dramatic when it ended. No shouting matches, no infidelity, just this slow erosion over years until we looked at each other one day and realized we were roommates who happened to share a surname. The divorce came through in 2020. By then, our kids were already halfway out the door anyway. My daughter Sarah had accepted a marketing position in Melbourne. My son James was finishing his finance degree and had his eyes set on London. They weren't angry with me. That would have been easier in some ways. They were just distant. The kind of distance where you get birthday texts that feel obligatory, where video calls at Christmas happen if the time zones align and nobody has other plans. Where nobody's done anything wrong exactly, but there's nothing left to say either. After the settlement, I sold the house in Christchurch, got $70,000 for it, which worked out to about $105,000 US at the time. Add in my pension contributions, and I wasn't wealthy, but I wasn't broke either. Problem was, I had absolutely no idea what to do with myself. At 57, I was too young to properly retire, too old to start some new career, and too worn out to keep doing what I'd been doing. Started watching YouTube one night when I couldn't sleep. You know how the algorithm works. You watch one video about retiring abroad and suddenly your entire feed is expat lifestyle channels. Thailand kept coming up. Looked nice enough, but it seemed too developed, too full of tourists doing the same thing I'd be doing. Vietnam looked interesting but chaotic. The language barrier seemed too steep for someone my age to manage. Then the Philippines kept appearing in my recommendations. English-speaking country, so I could actually communicate. Cost of living was cheap, like properly cheap. Easy visa process, or so the video said. Beautiful beaches, good diving. The more I watched, the more it seemed to make sense. I figured I'd give it a year, maybe teach some cooking classes to local restaurants, find some expat mates to have a beer with, just something different from the emptiness of that house in Christchurch, where I rattled around alone thinking about everything I'd sacrificed for a career that didn't even want me anymore. I wasn't looking for romance particularly. Wasn't one of those blokes who comes to Southeast Asia specifically hunting for a younger wife. I'd seen enough of those guys in the videos, the desperate ones, the creepy ones, the ones who thought their Western passport was worth its weight in gold. That wasn't me. I just wanted to breathe again, yeah? Wanted to wake up in the morning with something to look forward to instead of just another empty day. So I bought a ticket to Dumaguete. Why Dumaguete? Honestly, because some YouTube channel said it was good for retirees, relaxed, provincial, not too overwhelming. I knew nothing about the Philippines, really. Couldn't point to Dumaguete on a map before I started researching. Didn't know the first thing about Filipino culture or what I was walking into. Looking back now, that ignorance probably saved me in some ways. If I'd known everything that was coming, I might never have gone. And then I'd still be in Christchurch, still alone, still wondering if there was anything left in life worth getting out of bed for. At least this way I got an answer to that question, even if it wasn't the answer I wanted. I landed in Dumaguete in February 2023 with 2 suitcases and a tourist visa that gave me 30 days to figure out if this was actually going to work. The flight from Auckland went through Manila 5 hours to get there, then another hour on a smaller plane down to Dumaguete. By the time I arrived, I was knackered. The heat hit me the second I stepped off the plane. Not like a nice summer day back home. This was thick, wet heat that sat on you like a blanket you couldn't shake off. February's supposedly the cool season here. I couldn't imagine what summer would feel like. I'd booked an Airbnb near the boulevard for a month while I sorted myself out. The owner met me outside with a smile and a handshake, helped me carry my bags up 3 flights of stairs to a studio apartment that cost $12,000 a month, about $215 US, which worked out to maybe 330 New Zealand dollars, for a furnished place. Back in Christchurch, you couldn't rent a garden shed for that. First night, I barely slept. The noise was constant tricycles putting along the street, dogs barking, someone's karaoke bleeding through the walls at 2 in the morning, some bloke absolutely murdering a Sinatra tune. I lay there sweating under a ceiling fan that moved the hot air around without actually cooling anything, thinking I'd made a terrible mistake. But when morning came, I walked down to the boulevard and something shifted. The water was this impossible blue. People were jogging, walking their dogs, sitting on benches watching the sunrise. Street vendors were setting up fresh mangoes, grilled fish, coffee in little plastic bags with straws. Everything cost next to nothing. I got a proper breakfast for $200, about $350, and it was actually good. Fresh lumpia, garlic fried rice, eggs cooked how I asked. The woman running the stall spoke better English than half the people I'd worked with in New Zealand. I spent the first 2 weeks just exploring. Walked the length of the boulevard every morning. Tried the local markets where you could buy a week's worth of vegetables for what a single capsicum would cost back home. Checked out the diving operators. Apo Island looked amazing, though I hadn't been diving in 20 years, and wasn't sure my knees would handle it anymore. Went to Rizal Boulevard in the evenings when it was cooler, watched the locals and the handful of other expats wandering around. The city had this rhythm to it, yeah? Not frantic like Manila looked in the videos, but not dead either. University students everywhere. Dumaguete's apparently a university town. Little coffee shops, restaurants, the odd foreigner-friendly pub. It felt manageable. Like I could actually build a life here, instead of just existing. I needed to find a proper apartment if I was staying longer than a month, but I wasn't ready to commit to that yet. So I just kept walking, kept exploring, kept eating my way through the local food. Tried adobo, sinigang, lecan. Some of it was brilliant, some was too sweet for my taste, but it was all interesting. My chef brain never really switches off. I was already thinking about how I'd tweak the seasoning, adjust the cooking times, present it differently. That's how I ended up at Bayview Grill. It was week 3. I'd been walking past this seafood restaurant every day on my way back from the boulevard. Nice-looking place, not too touristy, air-conditioned, which mattered more than I wanted to admit. One afternoon, when the heat was particularly brutal, I ducked in for lunch. The food was good, properly good. Grilled squid that wasn't rubbery, garlic butter prawns that were actually fresh, not frozen. You spend enough time in kitchens, you can tell these things. Someone here knew what they were doing. That's when I first saw Jenny. She came over to my table after I'd finished, asked how everything was. Standard restaurant manager stuff. But she seemed genuinely interested, maybe early 30s, professional looking, wearing a polo shirt with the restaurant logo. Spoke perfect English with that slight Filipino accent that makes everything sound a bit musical. I told her the food was excellent. She smiled, said she'd pass that to the kitchen. Then she noticed I'd ordered one of the more complicated dishes on the menu, the whole fish with tamarind sauce, and asked if I worked in food service. I laughed, said I used to. Spent 35 years running kitchens back in New Zealand. Her face lit up. Said she'd been managing restaurants since she was 23. Loved the work, but it was exhausting. We talked for maybe 10 minutes about high-volume service, about dealing with difficult customers, about the difference between hotel restaurants and standalone places. Proper industry talk. It felt good to connect with someone over something I actually understood. I started going back every few days. The food was consistent. The air conditioning worked, and if I timed it right between lunch and dinner rush, Jenny would have a few minutes to chat. She never asked personal questions. Not where I was staying, not if I was married, not how much money I had. Just talked about food, about the restaurant business, about Dumaguete. Week 4, she mentioned a good property agent if I was looking for something longer term than an Airbnb. Gave me a name and number, no pressure. Said the agent had helped several expats find decent places at fair prices. I appreciated that helpful without being pushy. That same week, I finally worked up the nerve to ask if she wanted to grab a beer sometime after her shift. I felt like a bloody teenager doing it, stumbling over the words. But she just smiled and said sure. That sounded nice. We met at a quiet bar a few streets off the boulevard 2 nights later. Nothing fancy, just a local place with San Miguel on tap and some bar food. We talked for 3 hours. About running kitchens, about the stress of service industry work, about how the job owns your life if you let it. She told me about growing up in a barangay outside the city, about how her parents couldn't afford to send her to university, so she started working in restaurants at 18, worked her way up to management. I told her about the divorce, about my kids being scattered across the world, about feeling like I'd spent 35 years building a career that ultimately meant nothing. She listened without judgment, without those pitying looks people sometimes give you when they realize you're alone at 57. And here's the thing, she didn't touch me, didn't lean in close, didn't flutter her eyelashes, didn't do any of the things I'd been warned about in all those expat forum posts I'd read before coming here. She just talked to me like I was a normal person, like we were colleagues comparing war stories from the hospitality trenches. When the bill came, she reached for her purse. I said, "Don't be ridiculous, I'll get it." She insisted on splitting it. We actually argued about it for a minute before I finally convinced her to let me pay. But the fact that she'd tried, that meant something to me. I walked her to where she'd catch a tricycle home. She thanked me for the evening, said it was nice to talk to someone who understood the restaurant business, said maybe we could do it again sometime. I walked back to my Airbnb that night feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not quite happiness, that seemed too strong a word, but maybe possibility. Like there might be more to this Philippines adventure than just sitting alone in a cheap apartment watching my savings slowly drain away. I told myself to be careful, told myself not to be one of those stupid expats who falls for the first woman who's nice to him. Told myself Jenny was just being friendly, that this was probably what Filipino hospitality looked like. But I also couldn't deny that for the first time since landing here, I actually looked forward to tomorrow. Should have paid more attention to that voice in my head telling me to be careful. Should have, but didn't. We started dating properly in April. That's what you'd call it, yeah? Dating. Though even that felt weird to say at my age. I was being careful about it. I'd read enough expat forums before coming here to know the stereotypes. The warnings about bar girls, about women who see foreign men as walking ATMs, about families who treat Western boyfriends like unlimited cash machines. I'd watched those YouTube videos, the bitter expats telling cautionary tales, the ones who lost everything to some scam or another. But Jenny didn't fit any of those patterns. When we went out for meals, she'd insist on paying sometimes. Not every time, but often enough that I knew she wasn't just waiting for me to fund everything. She had her own life, her own job, her own friends. We'd go days without seeing each other because she was working, or I was exploring some other part of Negros Island. No pressure, no clinginess, no constant requests for my time or attention. Early May, I suggested we take a weekend trip to Siquijor. I'd been reading about it. The beaches, the old Spanish churches, the waterfalls seemed like a nice getaway. When I mentioned booking a place to stay, Jenny immediately asked how much it was and transferred half the cost to my GCash account before I could argue about it. I was confused by that, honestly. Pleasantly confused, but still. Every warning I'd read suggested Filipino girlfriends expected the foreign boyfriend to pay for everything. But here was Jenny insisting on splitting costs, sometimes even paying for her own tricycle fare when we went somewhere together. Made me think maybe the horror stories were just that, stories. Maybe not every Filipino was looking to drain some lonely expat's bank account. She introduced me to her friends that month. Normal people. A woman named Maria who taught at one of the local schools, a nurse called Grace who worked at the provincial hospital, a couple of guys from the restaurant industry, including the head chef from Bayview Grill who we'd have beers with sometimes. They treated me like just another person, not like some exotic foreigner or walking wallet. We'd sit around, talk about work, about Dumaguete, about the terrible traffic in Manila when anyone had to go there for business. It felt real. It felt genuine. 2 months into whatever we were calling this, Jenny mentioned she'd like me to meet her family, said they lived in a barangay about 40 minutes outside the city, that her mother had been asking about me. I'll admit, that made me nervous. Meeting the family felt like a big step, but she said it so casually, like it was just a normal thing people did, that I agreed. We took a jeepney out there on a Sunday morning. The ride was hot and cramped, 20 people squeezed onto benches meant for maybe 12. But Jenny chatted the whole way, pointing out landmarks, telling me stories about growing up out here. The barangay wasn't desperately poor. Not like some of the places I'd seen in documentaries about the Philippines, but it was definitely working-class provincial. Concrete houses with tin roofs, some nicer than others. Roosters and chickens wandering around, tricycles parked in yards, laundry hanging on lines, the smell of cooking fires and grilled fish hanging in the humid air. Jenny's family home was modest but well kept. Her father, Mang Roberto, came out to greet us, short, weathered, probably in his 60s. Drove a tricycle for income, Jenny had told me. Her mother, Ailing Rosa, was round and warm, immediately pulling me into a hug and saying, "Welcome, welcome." 2 younger brothers, both in their 20s, doing odd construction jobs around the area when they could find work. And Maricel, the sister, 20 years old, in her 3rd year of nursing school at Silliman University in Dumaguete. They'd prepared a massive lunch. Lechon, pancit, lumpia, grilled bangus, fresh mangoes, sticky rice. Way more food than 6 people could eat. Ailing Rosa kept piling more onto my plate, insisting I was too thin, that I needed to eat more. Mang Roberto asked about New Zealand, about what I did for work, about what I thought of the Philippines so far. The brothers were quieter but friendly enough. Maricel was bright, asked intelligent questions about how the restaurant industry worked in New Zealand versus here. Nobody asked for money. Nobody mentioned having a sick relative who needed emergency surgery. Nobody brought up needing help with anything. We spent the afternoon just sitting around, talking, drinking San Miguel Pale Pilsen that I'd brought as a gift. When it started getting dark, Jenny and I caught a jeepney back to Dumaguete. On the ride back, she leaned against my shoulder, said her family really liked me, said her mother already considered me part of the family. I remember thinking, okay, maybe not every Filipino family is running a con. Maybe some of them are just normal people living normal lives, and all those warning stories come from blokes who made bad choices or got involved with the wrong people. Looking back now, I still don't think I was wrong about that. Jenny's family wasn't running a con. The needs that came later, they were real. The poverty was real. The struggles were real. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Late May, about a week after that family visit, Jenny mentioned casually over dinner that tuition was coming up for Maricel, that the family was a bit short this semester. Her tips had been down at the restaurant. Her brother's construction work had been sporadic, and they were about 45,000 short of what they needed. She wasn't asking me for anything, just venting, the way you do with a partner when you're stressed about family stuff. But I could see the worry on her face. I did the math in my head. 45,000 was about 800 US, which worked out to maybe 1,200 New Zealand dollars. Not nothing, but not exactly breaking the bank either. And education mattered, yeah? Maricel was in nursing school. She was going to have a real career, a real future. Seemed worth supporting. I told Jenny I'd cover it. She immediately said no, that was too much, that I couldn't do that. We actually argued about it for a bit, but I insisted, told her it was nothing to me, that I wanted to help, that Maricel deserved the chance to finish her degree. Jenny cried. Proper crying, not just tears, said I didn't know what this meant to her family, how stressed they'd been trying to figure out how to cover the shortfall. Said her mother would want to thank me personally. I transferred the money the next day, but in 45,000 via Gcash to Ailing Rose's account. Got a handwritten thank you note 2 days later, written in Tagalog with an English translation that Jenny had clearly helped with, thanking me, blessing me, saying God had sent me to help their family. It felt good, properly good, like I was doing something that actually mattered, helping people who genuinely needed it. And the amount was tiny compared to what I'd spend on rent back in Christchurch. This was changing someone's life, letting Maricel stay in school, pursue her nursing career. Around that same time, the cafe dream started coming up more often in our conversations. Jenny would talk about it wistfully, this place she wanted to open someday, not a big restaurant, not a hotel operation, just a small neighborhood cafe doing breakfast and lunch. Good coffee, simple food done properly, a place where locals and the occasional expat could hang out. She'd talk about it the way I used to talk about opening my own place back when I was younger, before the reality of commercial kitchens ground that dream down to nothing. How she'd keep the menu tight, focus on execution. How she'd source local ingredients, work with small suppliers. How she'd saved up a bit, but nowhere near enough to actually make it happen. My chef brain started turning it over. What if I had the capital, not unlimited, but enough to make something like this work if we were smart about it? Jenny had the local knowledge, knew the suppliers, understood the Dumaguete market. She had management experience. And I could handle the kitchen side menu development, training staff, systems, and efficiency. It could actually work. I didn't say anything yet, just listened when she talked about it, started thinking through what it would take. Equipment costs, build-out, permits, staffing. The numbers I was running in my head seemed manageable. For the first time since landing in the Philippines, I felt like I had a purpose again, not just existing, not just killing time, until I died, actually building something, creating something, with someone. That feeling, being useful, being needed, being part of something bigger than just yourself, I hadn't felt that in years. Should have recognized it for what it was. Desperation wearing a mask of purpose. Should have, but didn't. July hit Dumaguete like a furnace. The rainy season was supposed to start, but that year it held off, and the heat just built and built until even the locals were complaining. I'd moved into a proper apartment by then, pay $22,000 a month, about 30-20 US, in a decent building with reliable aircon and water pressure. Jenny was staying over most nights. We'd fallen into this rhythm, yeah? She'd finish her shift, come to my place, we'd cook dinner together or order from one of the local places, watch something on my laptop, fall asleep under the aircon. It felt domestic. It felt real. That's when the first medical emergency hit. Jenny came over one night in tears, proper sobbing, the kind where she could barely get the words out. Her mother's vision had been getting worse for months, cataracts apparently. Ailing Rosa sold vegetables at the market, and she was having trouble seeing well enough to handle money, to sort produce, to do her job properly. The doctor said she needed surgery, soon, before it got worse. The cost was $85,000, about 1,500 US, which worked out to maybe 2,300 New Zealand dollars. Jenny was devastated, said the family didn't have that kind of money saved, said her mother was terrified of going blind, of not being able to work, of being a burden on everyone. Said they'd been trying to figure out how to pay for it, maybe borrowing from relatives, maybe taking a loan from one of those informal lenders who charge ridiculous interest rates. I didn't even hesitate. Of course I'd help. This was my girlfriend's mother, a woman who'd welcomed me into her home, fed me, treated me like family. And it was a medical emergency, not some frivolous expense, but actual health care that would preserve her vision, let her keep working, maintain her independence. I transferred the money that night, $85,000 via Gcash to cover the surgery. The operation happened a week later at the provincial hospital. Jenny and I went with Aling Rosa, waited while they did the procedure. When she came out with bandages on her eyes, she was crying. When they removed the bandages 2 days later and she could see clearly again, she cried more, kept blessing me, thanking God for sending me to help her family, saying I was an angel. It felt good. Really bloody good. Like I'd done something that actually mattered in the world. 1,500 US dollars pocket change compared to what I'd spent on kitchen equipment over the years back in New Zealand. And here it had preserved someone's eyesight, had let a woman keep her livelihood, had saved a family from financial ruin. August brought a different kind of crisis. The restaurant where Jenny worked brought in new management. Some outfit from Manila taking over the lease, restructuring everything. They cut hours across all the staff, reducing costs, maximizing profits, the usual corporate nonsense. Jenny's shifts dropped from 5 days a week to 3. Her income fell by 40% overnight. She tried to stay upbeat about it. Said she'd look for supplementary work, maybe pick up some catering jobs, see if other restaurants were hiring. But I could see the stress eating at her. She was worried about helping her family meet basic expenses. Her brother's construction work was still sporadic. Her father's tricycle income barely covered their household costs. And now Jenny's contribution was cut nearly in half. I suggested I start sending $15,000 monthly to help bridge the gap, about 270 US, which was less than I'd spend on groceries back in Christchurch, just temporary, until she found supplementary work or the restaurant situation stabilized. Jenny was reluctant, said that was too much, that she couldn't accept that kind of regular support. But I insisted, told her we were in this together, yeah? Told her it was nothing to me, that I wanted to help. that her family shouldn't suffer because some Manila corporation decided to squeeze more profit out of the restaurant. She accepted, promised it was temporary, said she'd pay me back once things stabilized. I set up a monthly GCash transfer $19,000 on the first of each month, straight to her account. September brought yet another emergency. Mang Roberto's tricycle broke down. Not a minor repair, major mechanical failure. The engine needed replacing, the transmission was shot, half the electrical system was fried. The thing was old, had been running for years without proper maintenance, and it finally just gave up. The repair estimate was $20,000, about 2,200 US, roughly 3,300 New Zealand dollars. Without the tricycle, Mang Roberto couldn't work. It was his only source of income. No tricycle meant no money coming in, which meant the family couldn't cover basic expenses, couldn't buy food, couldn't pay for electricity or water. The whole household economy depended on that tricycle running. Jenny showed me the repair quote on her phone, said her father was devastated, didn't know what to do. Said they'd tried to find a used tricycle to buy instead, but those cost even more. Said maybe they could get a loan, but the interest rates were insane and they'd be paying it off for years. I looked at the numbers. I'd been with Jenny for 7 months by then. I'd met her family multiple times. I'd seen their actual living conditions, the modest house, the lack of luxuries, the genuine struggle to make ends meet. This wasn't some elaborate scam. These were real people with real problems, and I was in a position to help. I transferred the $20,000 that afternoon. The tricycle got fixed. Took about a week for the mechanic to do all the work, but when Mang Roberto came to pick it up, he drove straight to my apartment. Showed up with this huge smile, tears in his eyes, holding a medallion of Santo Niño that he pressed into my hands. Said I'd saved his family. Said he'd pray for me every day. Said I was a blessing from God. By October, I sat down and actually tallied up what I'd spent. The tuition payment in May $45,000. The surgery in July $85,000. The monthly support starting in August $15,000 per month. The tricycle repair in September $20,000 total, roughly $275,000, which worked out to about 12,000 New Zealand dollars. Sounds like a lot when you say it all at once, but it had been gradual, spread over 5 months, and every single expense was legitimate. Not frivolous purchases or luxury items, but actual necessities. Education, healthcare, income replacement, essential transportation for work. These were things that genuinely mattered, and in between all those expenses, my relationship with Jenny was deepening. She was affectionate, attentive, talked about our future together. She'd started staying at my apartment 4 or 5 nights a week. Her toothbrush was in my bathroom, her clothes were in my closet. We'd talk about maybe getting a bigger place together, maybe traveling around the Philippines, maybe building something permanent. The cafe conversation had gone from wistful dreaming to actual planning. Late October, Jenny found a potential location. A small commercial space in a good neighborhood, not far from Silliman University, where there'd be steady foot traffic from students and faculty. Reasonable rent, $25,000 a month, about 450 US. Enough room to build out a kitchen and seating for maybe 20 people. She asked if I wanted to come look at it with her. I whopped that space with my professional eye. It could work. The layout was decent, the location was solid, the rent was manageable. My culinary brain started turning immediately. Espresso setup here, prep station there, simple menu focused on execution rather than complexity. Breakfast and lunch only. Filipino comfort food elevated slightly. Good coffee. Fresh ingredients sourced from local suppliers. Jenny's eyes were shining when I talked about the possibilities. She said we could actually do this. She said she had maybe $700,000 saved up, which was a start, but they'd need at least $5 million total for build-out, equipment, permits, licenses, initial inventory, staff wages for the first few months. I ran the numbers in my head. 1.5 million was roughly 27,000 US, about 41,000 New Zealand dollars. I'd invested more than that in kitchen equipment for restaurants I didn't even own back home. This would be different. This would be ours. Well, hers legally. I'd done my research by then, knew that foreigners couldn't own businesses outright in the Philippines. Everything would need to be in Jenny's name, the lease, the business registration, the permits, the bank accounts. But we'd be partners in practice. She'd handle the day-to-day management, I'd develop the menu and train the staff, and we'd split the profits. More importantly, we'd have something to build together. A real future. Something meaningful. Late October, sitting in my apartment with the aircon humming and a couple of San Miguels between us, we made the decision. I'd invest 25,000 US for the cafe, build out, equipment, permits, licenses, everything needed to get it open and running. All in Jenny's name because that's how it had to work here. But she'd manage the front of house and business operations. I'd handle the kitchen and menu, and we'd live in the small apartment above the cafe space that came with the lease. It was a partnership. It was a future. It was something real. Jenny cried when I told her I'd do it. Happy tears, grateful tears. Said I was changing her life. Said this was everything she'd dreamed about. Said she'd work harder than she'd ever worked to make it successful, to make me proud, to prove I hadn't made a mistake trusting her. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Direction. The sense that I was building something that mattered, with someone who mattered. Looking back now, I can see exactly what I was doing. I was a lonely 57-year-old man desperate to feel needed, desperate to matter to someone, desperate to build something after decades of building other people's dreams in other people's kitchens. I was pouring money into a relationship because it made me feel important, because it gave me purpose, because the alternative was sitting alone in an apartment watching my life tick away one empty day at a time. But at the time, it felt right. It felt like the smartest thing I'd ever done. I'd crossed the point of no return without even realizing it, should have seen it, should have recognized the pattern for what it was, should have at least kept better documentation, gotten something in writing, protected myself legally, should have. But I didn't. November and December consumed us. The build-out became my entire life, in a good way, I thought at the time. We signed the lease on the space the first week of November. 25,000 a month for 2 years, with the option to renew. The place was bare concrete when we got the keys. Just walls, a floor, exposed wiring, plumbing roughed in but not finished. Everything else we'd have to build from scratch. Jenny's brothers came in to do most of the labor. Skilled enough with construction work, and they charged me fair rates, $800 a day each, about 14 US. They built out the kitchen area, put up drywall to separate front of house from back of house, installed the plumbing for sinks and the grease trap, ran electrical for all the equipment I'd be bringing in. Hot work in that Dumaguete heat, but they showed up every day, put in solid hours. The permits were another nightmare entirely. Welcome to the Philippines, yeah? You need permits for everything. Barangay clearance first had to go to the local barangay captain, explain what we were doing, pay the fees. Then the mayor's permit from City Hall, which required submitting plans, waiting for approval, more fees. Health department inspection and certification. Fire safety clearance, business name registration, DTI permit. BIR registration for tax purposes. Each one cost money. Each one took time. Each one required patience and often a fixer. Someone who knew which office to go to, which forms to fill out, which palms to grease to get things moving faster. Nothing was officially corrupt, mind you. just fees, processing fees, expediting fees, documentation fees. By the time we had all the permits sorted, we'd spent $180,000 on bureaucracy alone, about 3,200 US. And that was with Jenny handling most of it, navigating the system in Tagalog, knowing which officials to charm and which to just pay off efficiently. While the build-out was happening, I was sourcing equipment. This is where my years in professional kitchens actually meant something. I found a used but decent espresso machine from a cafe in Cebu that was closing down $85,000, about a 1,500. Drove up there myself on a bus to inspect it, make sure it was properly maintained, negotiate the price. A commercial refrigerator from a supplier in Manila W20,000 delivered. A 6-burner gas range with oven 95,000. Stainless steel prep tables, sinks, shelving another W275,000 all told. Plates, glasses, cutlery, pots, pans, utensils, serving equipment, and 45,000. Every peso I spent, I was mentally converting back to New Zealand dollars, watching my savings account shrink. But it felt right. This was an investment. This was building something real. By mid-December, the space was coming together. The kitchen was functional. The front of house looked decent, simple tables and chairs. A counter for ordering and pickup. Good lighting, clean paint on the walls in warm colors that Jenny had picked out. The small apartment upstairs was livable, one room with a bed, a tiny bathroom, a hot plate for cooking when we didn't want to eat cafe food. I spent those weeks training Jenny and the 2 staff we'd hired, both young women from the area, early 20s, willing to work hard for $450 a day, plus tips. I taught them my systems. Mise en place, everything in its place, prepped and ready before service starts. Timing, understanding how long each dish takes, coordinating multiple orders. Plating, making even simple food look appealing. Cleanliness standards. The kitchen stays spotless, no exceptions, ever. Jenny was a quick learner. She already knew restaurant management, but I taught her the kitchen side. How to expedite orders, how to manage inventory so nothing goes to waste, how to work with suppliers to get the best prices without sacrificing quality. We developed the menu together, breakfast and lunch only, closed by 3 p.m. every day. Filipino comfort food, but elevated slightly. Proper tapsilog with perfectly cooked beef, garlic rice that actually had flavor, eggs cooked to order. Chicken adobo, the way it should taste. Pancit that wasn't swimming in oil. Fresh lumpia made that morning. And good coffee, proper espresso drinks, not instant Nescafe. I'd trained one of the girls on the espresso machine until she could pull a decent shot consistently. The menu was tight. 12 items max. Focus on execution rather than variety. Source local ingredients from the market every morning. Keep costs down. Keep quality high. Keep it simple. We set our prices carefully. Most items between $21.80, about $2.3 US. Coffee, $60-$90. Cheaper than the tourist places, more expensive than the turo stalls, but still affordable for locals and appealing to expats who wanted decent food in a clean environment. Opening day was the first week of January 2024. We called it Jenny's Kitchen and Coffee. Clear, personal. Jenny had designed a basic logo, printed some flyers, put up a Facebook page. We invited friends, family, some expats I knew from around Dumaguete. That first day was chaos. Proper chaos. The kind where you're running on adrenaline and prayer and muscle memory from decades of service. Orders coming in faster than we'd anticipated. Equipment not quite working right. Staff forgetting steps in the rush. Me in the kitchen calling orders, plating, checking every dish before it went out. Jenny managing the front, taking orders, making change, keeping customers happy even when wait times stretched longer than we'd like. But we got through it. and people came back the next day. And the day after that, by week 3, we had regulars, university students who'd come in for breakfast before class, local office workers grabbing lunch, a few expats who appreciated having a clean place with good coffee and food that didn't destroy your stomach. By week 4, we were hitting our stride. Staff knew the routine. Equipment was running smoothly. The rhythm of service felt natural. February, we turned our first profit. Not massive, maybe 40,000 after all expenses, about 720 US. But we were in the black. We were covering rent, utilities, supplies, staff wages, and still had money left over. I felt pride I hadn't felt in years. I'd built this. Well, we'd built this. From nothing to a functioning, profitable business in 3 months. Every morning I'd wake up in the apartment upstairs, come down to the cafe, start prep for the day. Real work, meaningful work. Work that mattered. Jenny was incredible during this time. Working 16-hour days, exhausted but happy. Up at 5 a.m. to help with prep, managing front of house during service, handling suppliers and accounts in the afternoon, cleaning and closing up at night. She'd come upstairs at 7 or 8 p.m., barely able to stand, collapse on the bed, and we'd talk about the day, about how many customers we'd served, about what was selling well, about maybe expanding the menu, about eventually adding dinner service, about making this a real success story. It felt like we were building a life together, a real future. This wasn't just a cafe. It was proof that starting over was possible, that at 57 I could still create something meaningful, that I hadn't wasted my chance at happiness. Then March came. That's when I first noticed Jenny was always on her phone. I mean, she'd been using it for business, taking photos for the Facebook page, messaging suppliers, coordinating with staff. But this was different. Constant texting, scrolling through messages late at night, stepping outside to take calls even when we were alone in the apartment. When I asked about it, she said it was suppliers, staff scheduling, customer inquiries. Made sense. She was running a business. Of course she'd be on her phone a lot. But something nagged at me. She'd tilt the screen away when I was near. Would grab her phone quickly if a notification came in while it was on the counter. Started keeping it face down all the time. One night in mid-March, a Gcash notification popped up while her phone was charging across the room. Mark sent you 5,000. She practically lunged for it. Said it was her cousin paying back a loan. I didn't think much of it at the time. Filipino families are always moving money around for each other, settling debts, helping out with various things. But the phone behavior continued. Late-night messaging when she thought I was asleep. Stepping outside to take calls even when it was raining. Getting defensive when I mentioned it casually. "Don't you trust me?" she'd say. "Are you going to be one of those jealous foreigners who think Filipino women are all cheaters? I'm working hard for our business, Trevor. I'm stressed. I'm tired. And now you're interrogating me about my phone?" I backed off. Felt guilty for even bringing it up. Of course I trusted her. She was working herself to exhaustion for our cafe, for our future. I was being paranoid, insecure, one of those suspicious expats who couldn't just accept that they'd found something real. But even as I told myself that, a small voice in the back of my head wouldn't shut up. I ignored it. Pushed it down. Focused on the cafe, on the business, on the life we were building. Should have listened to that voice. Should have, but didn't. Late March, things escalated. Jenny was constantly on that phone. Not just during the day, I could understand that. The cafe generated legitimate messages about supplies, staff schedules, customer inquiries. But late at night, when we were alone in the apartment upstairs, she'd be messaging someone, the screen lighting up her face in the dark. When I'd roll over, try to initiate some intimacy, she'd say she was exhausted, too tired, stressed from the business. Fair enough. Launching a cafe is brutal work. I knew that better than anyone. But it had been weeks. The physical distance between us was growing even as we lay in the same bed. She started staying late at the cafe more often. Said she needed to do inventory, sort through paperwork, meet with potential suppliers. When I'd offer to help, she'd say she had it handled, that I should rest, that she didn't want to burden me with the administrative side of things. I tried not to read too much into it. Tried to trust. Tried to remember that she was working herself ragged and I should be supportive, not suspicious. First week of April, she told me she was going to Manila for the weekend, meeting with a potential coffee supplier who could get us better wholesale prices, save us maybe $5,000 a month on beans. Made business sense. I told her to go, that I'd handle the cafe while she was away. That weekend felt long. I worked the cafe solo with the 2 staff members, managed well enough, but the apartment felt empty without her. I'd gotten used to her presence, to the sound of her breathing next to me at night, to waking up together and heading downstairs to start prep. Sunday night she came back exhausted, said the meetings had run long, that Manila traffic was murder, that she just needed to sleep. I held her while she drifted off, felt grateful she was home. Monday morning she was up at 4:30 a.m., rushing to get down to the cafe before the suppliers arrived for the morning delivery. Kissed me quickly, said she'd see me downstairs, grabbed her bag and was out the door before I'd fully woken up. I got up around 5:30, made coffee, sat at the small table in the apartment. That's when I noticed her laptop was still there, open on the counter where she'd left it charging. The screen was asleep but not blocked. I touched the trackpad and it lit up. Facebook was open. Messenger was open. I'm not the snooping type, never have been. In 30 years of marriage to Sandra, I never once checked her phone, read her emails, went through her things. That's not who I am. But something compelled me. That small voice that had been nagging at me for weeks suddenly got very loud. I clicked on Messenger. The first conversation thread was with someone named David Chen. Recent messages from yesterday. I miss you too, baby, Jenny had written. Manila was good, but I wish you were here with me. Then below that, can you send extra this month? The cafe equipment needs maintenance and it's expensive. David's response, of course, my love. Anything for you. I'm sending 20,000 today. I can't wait to visit in June. We'll finally be together. My stomach dropped. I scrolled up through their conversation history. Months of messages, daily good mornings and good nights. David calling her my future wife. Talking about moving to the Philippines permanently next year. Sending 20,000 every month via Gcash. The exact amount I'd seen coming through on her phone notifications multiple times. The ones she'd said were from cousins or business contacts paying back loans. My hands were shaking as I clicked on another conversation. Mark Williams, Vancouver, Canada. Same dynamic. Same terms of endearment. I love you, baby. Thinking about you always. Can't wait until we're together. Mark was sending 15,000 monthly. He'd helped pay for her mother's cataract surgery. Apparently, my 185,000 wasn't the only contribution. Mark thought he was her boyfriend, thought they were planning a future together, thought he was the one helping her family, supporting her through difficult times. I kept clicking through conversations. Robert Patterson, Manchester, UK. 118,000 monthly. Robert thought Jenny was managing a restaurant, technically true, I suppose, and saving money so they could be together properly when he retired next year. He'd sent extra money in September for her father's tricycle repair. The same tricycle I'd paid $120,000 to fix. Apparently, I'd only paid half. Robert had covered the rest. I went through 2 years of message history with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The pattern was clear. She had 4 active boyfriends, including me, each one sending monthly support, each one helping with family emergencies, each one believing they were in an exclusive relationship. She rotated who she asked for what. Tuition money from me, surgery money from me and Mark both, tricycle repair from me and Robert, monthly support from all of us, in different amounts. The cafe money. I scrolled back through the conversations from late last year. She'd told David she had 200,000 saved and needed .3 million more. Told Mark she had .300,000 saved and needed .2 million. Told Robert she had .250,000 saved and needed various amounts for equipment and permits. Each of them had sent thousands of dollars thinking they were funding different pieces of the cafe build-out. My $115 million wasn't the total investment. It was my share of a crowd-funded operation. I did rough math in my head. Over 2 years, Jenny had probably pulled in $60,000 to $70,000 US from the four of us combined. All while working full-time at Bayview Grill, then transitioning to running the cafe we'd all paid for, but only I was working in. The medical emergencies were real. The family needs were real. But they weren't being solved by one generous boyfriend. They were being solved by 4 men, each thinking he was the hero in his own relationship story. I sat there staring at the laptop screen as dawn light started filtering through the apartment window. Heard the sounds of the cafe opening below me, Jenny directing the staff, the coffee machine warming up, the familiar rhythm of morning prep I'd taught them all. Everything I thought I knew about the past year dissolved. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Jenny came through the door, stopped when she saw me sitting there with her laptop open. Her face went white. "How many of us are there?" I asked. My voice sounded strange, flat, like someone else was talking. She started crying immediately. "Trevor, I can explain." "How many?" "You don't understand how hard it is here." The tears were real, streaming down her face. "My family depends on me. Everyone depends on me. You don't know what it's like to have that pressure every single day, knowing that if you don't figure out how to get money, your parents don't eat. Your sister can't go to school. Your whole family suffers." "How many of us are there, Jenny? What did you think?" Her voice shifted, became harder. "That I could build all this on a restaurant manager's salary? That I could pay for my mother's surgery and my sister's tuition and fix my father's tricycle and open a cafe all by myself? How, Trevor? You tell me how." I just looked at her. "4, she said finally. "Including you. 4 good men who wanted to help. 4 men who got what they wanted. You all got to feel needed, got to be heroes, got to have someone who cared about you. And I got to survive. I got to help my family. I got to build something. Nobody got hurt." "Nobody got hurt," I repeated. "Everyone knew what they were getting: companionship, affection, someone who appreciated them. I gave you all that, Trevor. I worked hard for this cafe. I built this business. Was anything I did a lie? I worked 16-hour days. The business is real. The food is good. We're profitable. I did everything I said I would do." "Was any of it real?" I asked. "With me specifically. Was any of it real?" "Of course it was real." She wiped her face. "I care about you. I care about all of them. It's not fake just because there's more than one. I'm not hurting anyone. This is how I survive. This is how Filipino women like me survive." I felt like I was watching the conversation from outside my own body. "Who owns the cafe?" I asked. She hesitated. "It's in my name. The lease, the business registration, the bank accounts. Everything. You know that. Foreigners can't own businesses here. So, if I walk away, I leave with nothing." "You could stay," she said. "You could keep helping with the cafe. Keep being part of my life. Lots of men know about this kind of arrangement, and they're okay with it. They accept that this is how things work here. You don't have to give up everything you've built, but you won't give up the others." "I can't," she said. "I need them. My family needs them. This is how I take care of everyone who depends on me. I'm not going to apologize for surviving, Trevor. We stood there in the apartment above the cafe I'd funded, looking at each other across a distance that had nothing to do with physical space. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," she said finally. "I wish you hadn't. But I'm not sorry for what I did. I did what I had to do. That's all." I nodded slowly, closed the laptop, stood up. "I need to think," I said. She nodded, wiping her face. "The cafe opens in 30 minutes. I have to get downstairs." And she left. Just like that. Went downstairs to open the cafe for another day of service, leaving me standing alone in the apartment, trying to process the fact that everything I'd believed for the past year had been a carefully managed illusion. Not even an illusion, really. The feelings were real. The work was real. The family needs were real. I just wasn't the only one solving them, and I'd never been what I thought I was to her. I spent 3 days in that apartment, barely moving. Didn't go down to the cafe. Didn't eat much. Just sat there running the numbers over and over in my head. Maricel's tuition, $45,000, about $800 US or $1,000 NZD. But Mark had sent money for tuition too. How much of that actually went to Maricel? How much got redistributed? Ailing Rosa's surgery, $85,000, about $500 US or 2,300 NZD. But Mark sent money for that too. Did the surgery actually cost money for that too? Did the surgery actually cost money, 5,000? Or did it cost 40,000 and the rest went elsewhere? Monthly support, 15,000 from me, 15,000 from David, 15,000 from Mark, 15,000 from Robert, 68,000 total, about 1,200 US every single month. For a family whose household expenses probably ran 19,000, 20,000, 25,000 monthly. The tricycle, 1,000 from me, but Robert sent money too. Did it actually cost 120,000 to repair, or was half of my money profit? The cafe, my 25,000 US, plus whatever David, Mark, and Robert had sent over the months. Probably 60,000, 70,000 total investment, all crowdfunded, all in her name. Total from me alone, roughly 42,000 US over the course of a year. About 64,000 New Zealand dollars. Gone. And I had zero legal recourse. The cafe was entirely in Jenny's name. The family support was gifts, given willingly with no documentation. Even if I hired a lawyer, what would I argue? That I'd given money to my girlfriend and her family? That's not fraud. That's just being a mug. I considered staying. Some men do. I knew this from the Expat Network's blokes who discover they're not the only one, decide they're okay with it, accept it as the cost of companionship in the Philippines. They know the girl has other boyfriends sending money. They make peace with it. They tell themselves at least they're getting something out of it. I couldn't do that, not because of the money, though that stung, but because of the fundamental deception. For 8 months I believed I was building something real with one person, building a future, building a life. The entire foundation was a lie. I considered sabotaging the cafe, exposing Jenny to the other boyfriends, causing maximum damage on my way out. Some men would. But what's the point? The cafe is successful because Jenny's actually a good manager. The food is good because I taught her proper kitchen systems. The other men wouldn't believe me anyway. They're as invested as I was, as desperate to believe their relationship is real. David's probably already planned his June visit. Mark's probably already looking at retirement timelines. Robert's probably already imagining life in the Philippines with his girlfriend. And destroying the cafe wouldn't get my money back. It would just hurt the 2 girls working there, destroy their jobs, damage the small business that actually is profitable and well run. So I packed my things, found a new apartment across town through an agent. Smaller, cheaper, PD Sist. $2,000 a month. Back where I started, basically. I blocked Jenny's number, blocked her on Facebook. Didn't answer when she came to my building 3 days later, asking the security guard to call up to my unit. Through the expat network, I heard she was telling people we'd had a fight. That I was being unreasonable and jealous, that I'd come around once I calmed down and realized how good we had it. I didn't come around. May through August, I kept low profile, started cooking private dinners for expats who'd hire me $1,000, $5,000 per dinner depending on the menu, enough to cover rent and expenses while I figured out what came next. I processed what happened, recognized all the warning signs I'd ignored. The phone behavior, the Gcash notifications she'd explained away, the family emergencies that always had solutions just barely out of reach until I stepped in, the defensive reactions when I'd expressed even mild concern. I'd been so focused on helping, on being needed, on building something, that I'd ignored basic sense. September, I started connecting with other expats who'd had similar experiences. Not the angry, bitter ones who rant on forums about how all Filipinas are scammers. I'm past that kind of generalization. But the ones who acknowledged the complexity. One American, Mike, showed me his girlfriend's phone by accident one night when we were having beers. She'd left it on the table when she went to the bathroom. A message came through from someone called James, sending hearts and "miss you, baby." Mike saw me see it, just shrugged. "Yeah," he said. "I know. She's got 2 or 3 others. I've made my peace with it. She's good company when she's here. Costs me about $400 a month. Cheaper than being alone." I realized then that some men accept this arrangement knowingly. They understand the game. They're fine with it. I'm not one of them. February 2025, I'm packing up again. Moving to Cebu next month. Fresh start. Bigger expat community, more opportunities for private chef work. I've rebuilt my savings somewhat, still down about 64,000 USD total, but not destitute. Living carefully, cooking for others, keeping my head down. I'm avoiding romantic relationships entirely now. When other expats ask my advice about Filipino girlfriends, I tell them the same thing every time. The need's real, mate. The family pressure's real. The poverty's real. Those aren't lies. Filipino culture genuinely expects children to support their parents. Extended family obligations are genuinely massive here. The medical emergencies, the tuition payments, the broken tricycles, all real expenses. But that doesn't mean you're the only one filling it. Yeah, nah, I should have known better. Do your due diligence. Protect your assets. Get things in writing. Understand that girlfriends might mean something different here than it does back home, and never ever invest money you can't afford to lose in a business you don't legally own. I'm not bitter exactly, more resigned. I don't blame all Filipino women. I don't think Jenny's evil. I understand the survival calculus. She found a way to build financial security by diversifying her income sources across multiple foreign boyfriends. Smart, actually, from a purely economic standpoint. She worked hard. She built a real business. She supported her family. She did exactly what she needed to do to survive and thrive in a country with no safety net. But it means I lost 64,000 NZD and almost a year of my life believing in something that was never what I thought it was. The lesson I've learned, the one I share with every new expat who asks, in the Philippines, you're not necessarily being scammed. The crisis might be real. The family obligations might be genuine. The poverty might be exactly as bad as she says it is. But you might not be exclusive. The crisis you're solving, 3 other blokes might be solving it at the same time. The cafe you're funding, you might be one of 4 investors, and you're the only one who doesn't know it. Ask questions. Verify everything. Don't assume Western relationship norms apply. and protect yourself legally, financially, emotionally. That's all I've got. That's the story. Yeah, nah. Should have known better. Trevor's story raises questions that a lot of men face here in the Philippines. And the truth is, the multiple boyfriend phenomenon he experienced isn't always pure manipulation. Sometimes it's a survival strategy in a country where poverty is real and opportunities are limited, especially for women. Trevor's situation had some added complexity. Jenny wasn't sitting around doing nothing. She was genuinely building a business, genuinely working hard. The cafe exists. It employs people. The food is good. But she was crowdfunding it across 4 men, each of whom believed they were her sole partner. Here's what viewers need to understand about the Philippines. There's no social safety net here. Extended family support isn't just expected, it's culturally mandated. An eldest daughter supporting her parents and siblings isn't exceptional. It's standard. For many Filipino families, it's survival. For Jenny, those 4 foreign boyfriends represented what OFW work. Overseas Filipino worker employment represents for millions of Filipinos. A way to send money home. A way to build something. A way to lift your family out of poverty. The deception wasn't in the needs. Those were real. The cataract surgery happened. The tuition got paid. The tricycle got fixed. The cafe got built. All of that was genuine. The deception was in the exclusivity of the relationships. Now, some expats knowingly accept non-exclusive arrangements. They understand they're not the only one. They're okay with it. They see it as a transaction, companionship, and affection in exchange for financial support. For some men, that works. Some expats never find out. They live their whole lives believing they're in an exclusive relationship, send money monthly, visit once or twice a year, and never discover the truth. And some, like Trevor, discover it and have to decide what they can live with. The Philippines is a country of contradictions. Deep poverty exists alongside genuine warmth. Real cultural obligations exist alongside strategic relationships. Sincere affection exists alongside financial calculation. Understanding these contradictions doesn't make the losses hurt less. But it might help the next person make better decisions. It might help someone protect themselves while remaining open to authentic connection. Not every relationship in the Philippines follows this pattern. Plenty of genuine, exclusive, loving relationships exist between foreign men and Filipino women. But enough relationships do follow this pattern that every foreign man should enter with eyes open. Verify what you're told. Protect your assets. Understand the legal limitations. Foreigners can't own land or businesses here. Get things in writing. Don't invest money you can't afford to lose. And remember Trevor's core lesson. The poverty is real, the need is real, but that doesn't mean you're the only one filling it. Thanks for watching Inside the Philippines. If Trevor's story resonated with you, or if you learned something that might help you or someone you know, please share this video. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories from expats navigating the complexities of life in the Philippines. Until next time, stay safe out there.